We will discuss all of these developments in Iran with our guests. From Tehran, we have Dr. Mahmoud Mahdi Sharatamdar. And from London, we have with us Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos. He's introducing you, sir. I will begin with you, Dr. Muhammad Mahdi. Good evening to you, Dr. Muhammad, and Dr. Marcus as well. Good evening, sir. Dr. Muhammad, there are a lot of developments before we go into details via our segment tonight. Developments, security investments, and developments on the level of the nuclear file and relations with the agency, and of course movements related to the first anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death and the disturbances of last year. Many, of course, developments at the same time. Do you think, Dr. Shramdadar, that there are intentions by the US and the West to repeat what happened last year and to try to revive disturbances and another version, so to say, of last year's scenario? Good evening to you, to your distinguished guests, to your audience as well. Undoubtedly, there were intentions. Many evidence so that the armed groups that were arrested, terrorist groups that were arrested by the security forces, the media channels, the TV channels that target Iran, and that these media that of course are backed by the US and some Western forces that were mobilized, these media forces were mobilized during the past 24 hours at least, or at least for months now. These media channels have been mobilized to try to stir demonstrations and protests at the eve or on the eve of Mahsa Amini's death. Now, tonight, I think today, after the first anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death has ended, and you know, all the news headlines, all the news sites show that nothing has happened. Does this mean that the United States or Western countries did not have intentions? No, they had bad intentions, but they were unable to achieve their objectives because the security forces, Iranian security forces, have planned in order to thwart any actions. Dr. Sharamadar, I think the situation, the condition, the internal and external environment as well has changed since last year, where there was an attempt as well in order to create disturbances in Iran. Yes, of course, despite the difficulties, the living difficulties, but the Iranian economy is improving, oil sale is improving, economic indices are improving as well. The relations, regional relations are improving with neighboring countries as well, especially, for example, relations with China, Russia, BRICS. There's a lot of positive developments. All the figures show today that the internal and external situation of Iran is improving, and this of course falls in the benefit and interest of Iran to face any plans by the US. Dr. Papadopoulos, good evening, sir. A question to you, Dr. Papadopoulos. Allow me to remember with you what was, of course, what we heard last, or what was leaked actually last month of meetings of US diplomats that were discussing the Ukrainian file. And when one of them, according to some American newspapers have leaked, when the point of view within the Biden administration said that we should never acknowledge failure or talk about failure in Ukraine, because the price of talking about failure is higher than the failure itself, and we have to continue as if nothing has happened, so hiding the failure. Do you believe, Dr. Papadopoulos, that this same policy is being implemented today with Iran, i.e. last year there was an attempt that was not crowned by success, of course. There was was a plan that Iran has uncovered all of its details. There was a plan, of course, to, of course, cause disturbances in Iran. Do you believe, Dr. Marcus, also denial applies on the Iranian situation?
Yes, I do. For over 4 decades now, the West, principally America and Britain, have sought to destroy the Iranian revolution, have sought to overthrow the Iranian government, and have sought to return Iran to how it was during the days of the Shah, namely a vassal state of America's and Britain's. But those attempts have failed. And now, today, the West is attempting to weaken the Iranian government, especially the Iranian economy, under the cover of women's rights. Now, obviously, I do not know the actual cause of death of Mahsa Amini, but what I do know is that the West's focus on this case, on the tragic death, is not motivated by concern over women's rights. After all, the West has killed millions of women in the Middle East, in North Africa, and elsewhere in the world through its wars, its sanctions, and its support of numerous terrorist groups. And also, in Western countries today, there is a systematic and incremental erosion of women's rights taking place, whereby the word women is being erased from Western societies, where mothers in the West are no longer referred to as mothers, but as people, and where women are forced to use the same toilets as men in workplaces and in restaurants. And on top of that, there are now calls in America, Canada and Britain for the word vagina to be replaced with bonus hole. So, in concluding, the West cares nothing for the rights of women, but it is using this as a weapon against the Iranian government, as a weapon against the Iranian revolution, as a weapon against the Iranian people. And by doing that, this gives them the pretext to place more and more sanctions on Iran. But however many more sanctions the West places on Iran, it will not achieve the Western objective. Iran is strong politically, militarily, economically, and Iranian society is unified. Last year, hundreds of thousands of Iranian women took to the streets in towns and cities across Iran to show support for the Iranian government and the Iranian revolution.
Dr. Marcus, what the Western leaders and what Western politicians and Western media talk about democracy, freedom, women rights, etc. When they achieve their objectives, nothing of that is implemented. When they occupy these countries, things worsen greatly, even more. We have example in Iraq, an example in Libya, and we have many examples of countries where they said that they want to give them democracy and they have to get rid of their governments and because that will make them better states. But what happened is quite the contrary. Of course, today ethnicities are fighting among one another, or systems whereby there is confessional or regional division and encouragement of the division as well, and more suffering for the people. But what is important, Dr. Marcus, is that these calls are still tickling, so to say, the emotions and dreams of many of the elites, be it in our region or other regions of the world. Isn't this right, sir?
Yes, absolutely. The people of the Middle East know very well, perhaps more so than any other people in the world, that the Western ruling elites are not immoral, They are amoral, and they know that the Western ruling elites are psychopathic killers. They will kill anyone, man, woman or child, under the heading of love, equality, progressiveness and diversity. They feel no moral compunctions in taking any action which serves their purpose, namely to strengthen Western global supremacy and to make them even more richer. That is the reality of the Western ruling elites. The West is not democratic. There is no rule of law in Western countries, and Western culture, including Christianity, has virtually been destroyed by the Western ruling elites. The Western ruling elites are not anti-Muslim, they are anti-religion. They hate Islam as much as they hate Christianity. Religion is a threat to the Western ruling elites, because where there is religion, people love God. Whereas the Western ruling elites want people across the world to submit to the Western ruling elites. They want people to submit to the dollar, to the pound, to the stock exchange. That is why the Western ruling elites are looking to destroy religion wherever their cancerous tentacles are in the world.
Regarding the American approach or how the US was dealing lately with Iran, we have seen that the Americans are releasing certain, of course, Iranian frozen funds in some countries in return of releasing American prisoners in Iran. We have found Americans as well are completely silenced regarding, of course, to the Iraqi separatist groups of expelling them. In the same context as well, we see that there is an escalation, and there are increasing pressure regarding the nuclear file after Grossi's statement today. Grossi, of course, IAEA chief Grossi considers that relations with Iran is, of course, filled with tensions, and expelling the agency's inspectors affects directly the work of the agency. I think there's a crisis that is looming with the agency. How do you explain, Dr. Shahriar, how the Americans are dealing with Iran? Are they summarizing today their policy with a stick and a carrot policy? First, before I answer your question, and which is a very opportune question, I would like to add to what your distinguished guest has said. If we talk in the language, in figures, if we talk in figures, let's look at the cultural indexes, educational, scientific, social indexes, economic indices actually, or political indices, be it in the field of women's rights or in general in the Iranian society after the Islamic revolution compared to the pre-revolution, or at least compared to the countries in the region. You will see that all of these indices, or most of these indices at least, are improving and have recorded a progressive stage. And regarding women's, of course, freedom, perhaps indices are more developed than, of course, are better than, of course, the indices related to males. And also regarding democracy, if you compare the situation of Iran to other countries, where there's election, of course, separation of powers, etc., all of that, all the principles that we know in the democratic process. Also, more than that, I would like to indicate to a point, and then I will answer your question, which is that the democratic process, wherever it is implemented in the region, in the countries of the region, of course, the result was contrary to the aspirations of the US, meaning the democratic approach of the people of the region does not fall in the interest of the US. This is why the US has stood in the face of the results of many democratic processes in the region. We agree, Dr. Sharamadar, we agree, and many are convinced actually, many of the Arab people and of course the Islamic people believe that the issue of democracy are only, of course, allegations, and the US has alliances and support many dictatorships or oppressive, of course, regimes in the region. And we agree on that. There are slogans, and there are, of course, cover-ups in order to serve the interests of the US, not the interests of the people. And these convictions are based on experiences, and while we are speaking, these experiences are still present regarding Iran and the different approaches. Dr. Sharamadar. Also with regards to human rights and other fields, but with regards to your question regarding the US administration, in truth, Biden's administration is in a crisis because it has given promises. Biden made promises in his campaign and these promises were not fulfilled, including, for example, solving the problem in the Middle East, of course, JCPOA, the China problem is still there, for example. In addition, the Ukrainian war. Today, Biden's administration, of course, is facing upcoming elections. This is why they need to achieve some successes, some victories, some objectives, and not to look as if it was subject to the Iranian policy or to the Iranian demands, at least. And this is why, for example, regarding the issue of course, releasing certain funds Iranian funds, of course, in order to exchange prisoners, the U.S. administration, of course, agreed to Iranian demands, but at the same time, Biden's administration is always giving contrary statements. Of course, the Secretary of State, the U.S. Secretary of State, and some other U.S. officials, their statements show that they want to, of course, they always have statements against Iran in order to satisfy some U.S. voters, satisfy the Zionist lobby in the U.S., and so as the Democratic Party will not lose the upcoming elections. I believe that this policy will continue until the results of the elections really are announced. Allow me, Dr. Muhammad and Dr. Marcus, to show a report regarding what we talked about regarding the campaigns and pressures that the administration is practicing against Iran. The pressure against Iran is aligned with, of course, media misinformation after the death of Amini in order to mobilize against Iran. This time, the Western media is leading a campaign via its newspapers, of course, that have published fake news regarding the arrest or detention of Amini's father, and Iranian authorities have responded in addition to other headlines, of course, that incite against the Iranian government as well. And today they are breathing into the fire of strife in order to increase pressure on Iranian authorities that are of course trying, of course, to stop any disruptions in the country. Back to you, Dr. Muhammad Mahdi, before we go ask Dr. Marcus. This incitement, it seems, has expired because there's a situation, be it within Iran, the economic situation and the solutions the different solutions that were undertaken after disruptions of last year in Iran, or within the external opposition that fell apart as well, meaning that things, or actually that this kind of campaign will not give the results that the needed results. Of course, it did not. Iran was able to control the internal situation. Iran, the agreement that took place with Iraq regarding safeguarding the borders and expelling the terrorist factions or Iranian opposition actually was helped a lot. Today we can say that 80% of this agreement, the border agreement, has been implemented. These factions have been, of course, expelled from the borders. Yes, there is a lack in human resources. The Iraqi army needs more soldiers to be deployed on the borders. There's a problem here that is still not solved, which is, of course, bringing the head of these factions to the law. The main leaders are residing in the West, in European countries, but the field leaders, this problem that is discussed today between the government of Kurdistan province and the central government of Iraq, Iran was able to improve a lot, to change a lot. During this short period of time, Iran was able to improve certain situations, and also through the Iranian media, Iranian government was able to raise awareness regarding the plan and the Western conspiracy, regarding the media misinformation and the Iranian opposition. I think the media of the Iranian opposition is still very active, but we have heard, Dr. Mahdi, we have heard that some cells, some active cells that were working in order to create disruptions in Iran, starting from London and some other countries as well, some other European countries, many of them were, of course, stopped or thwarted, and a lot of media programs have been stopped as well. I'm talking about those working outside of Iran or in European countries, and some of them have closed their offices in London, etc. Meaning that even the statements of the opposition that formed a unified front in order to manage the situation in Iran and to manage the demonstrations. Today there's accusations there's an exchange of accusation between the opposition. Isn't this an indication? Yes, undoubtedly. Yes, first there's disappointment amongst the opposition because they were unable, despite mobilizing all of the resources of the Iranian opposition, of the European supporting and European support, were not able to achieve their goals. For example, what happened, I think, 3 months ago, some Iranian opposition media channels were begging the Iranian citizens to go to the streets, and this did not happen. There's a great, of course, differences of opinions between the symbols of Iranian opposition. Some of the media channels have stopped broadcasting. Even the media, of course, channels were impacted greatly by this difference of opinion, by the tensions between the opposition, and how Iran also improved its relations with regional countries. But some of these opposing channels are still inciting disruptions and tension. But despite all of that, they're unable to achieve anything in Iran. Dr. Marcus, back to you, sir. I would like to ask you, sir, this question based on the Iranian example, on how the U.S. deals with Iran, for example. I would like to ask you a question about the ability and the influence of the U.S. Today. In the past, U.S. was able, of course, to lead coups, to cause tension, disruptions, wage direct wars in order to topple systems and regimes in a certain period of time. But now, the Iranian model, last year there was an attempt whereby the U.S. deployed all its effort to create disruption of Iran, but it failed, as we see today. And today there's another attempt that has failed as well. There are other attempts by the United States in order to achieve objectives but I think they are unachievable. Do you believe that the U.S.'s ability, Dr. Marcus, the previous ability of the U.S. Throughout decades of time, do you believe that the power of the U.S. is dwindling, that the U.S. is losing its shine, its glimmer, that the U.S. is losing its capacities and capabilities?
Yes, I do. As a result of the Russian military campaign in Ukraine, Russia is slowly but surely dismantling American global hegemony, something which has existed ever since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. If we take the Middle East, yes, America is still supreme in the region, but this supremacy is being reduced. It is being reduced, for example, by how Iran has a strategic partnership with Russia, by how Syria has a strategic partnership with Russia, by how Hezbollah has an unofficial strategic partnership with Russia. On top of that, Russia is back in vogue in the Arab world, from the Middle East to North Africa. Many Arabs are looking to Russia as a way of protecting the region from the cancerous tentacles of America. And because of that, the ability of the Americans and the British and the Israelis to instigate wars and coups in the Middle East and in North Africa is being reduced. And on top of that, America is a bitterly polarized country. It is no longer certain that in 10 years from now, America will exist. It is very possible that secession could take place in America, whereby numerous states, for example, the states in the South, such as Mississippi, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, could decide that enough is enough. They do not wish to be ruled by by liberals, people who are normalizing pedophilia, people who are destroying Christianity, people who are destroying American culture. And those southern states could very well decide that they want to leave the Union. So America is in serious trouble at home, and American global supremacy is also in trouble. That said, America, as I speak now, is not a spent force. America remains a formidable power. America is not to be underestimated. But with the way things are going on the international arena and at home in America, it does look like the world will be free of American and in general Western global supremacy, which amounts to nothing else but a malignant tumour.
Dr. Muhammad Mahdi, in conclusion, after the second failure and on the first anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini, this death that turned into an attempt to disrupt the stability in Iran, be it last year or today, it seems that the plan did not, things did not go as planned. And do you believe, Dr. Muhammad Mahdi, that this file is closed now, or do you believe that every year that Mahsa Amini's death will be used as an excuse to cause disruptions? Will we have other attempts to cause tension next year on the second anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death? Yes, first, the issue of the death of Mahsa Amini was only a pretext to continue, of course, causing trouble in Iran. If this year and on the anniversary of her death they failed, I don't think the US will stop, of course, conspiring against Iran, and the US will use other pretexts, other means in order to cause disruptions. Why? Because Iran has toppled the equation in the region. Like your guest said, the US is dwindling today. Its supremacy is dwindling today. For example, the balance of powers in the Middle East really was in the hand of Israel and the US, and now it's not the case. All the US projects in Iraq and Syria, the axis of resistance was able to topple all the US projects, not only the axis of resistance, even Afghanistan, in Ukraine. The US economy is dwindling, the US dollar is losing its strength. There is today, of course, there is a call to deal with another currency other than the US dollar, and to stop the hegemony of the US dollar. Of course, it will not happen in the near future, but it's important that there is an attempt. 70% of trade exchange or commercial exchange between China and Russia is taking place using national currencies. India as well. A lot of countries are moving towards using other currencies than the US, of course. I believe that all of this began after the success or the victory of the Islamic Revolution, and today the Iranian army was the fourth or fifth army in the world. Iran also helped the US in the past in international level, security level, to, of course, to face off the Soviet Union. The US had a great, Iran during the days of the Shah was a great supporter of the US, and things have changed today. This is why the US will use different pretexts and allegations in order to reignite tensions and disruptions, in order to topple the regime in Iran. So we will have other headlines and other pretexts and other allegations. The conflict is still ongoing. Dr. Muhammad Mahdi, thank you for being with us from Tehran. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, thank you, sir, for being with us from London. Thank you, sir.